Second issue is the issue of community, about whether each person can believe in God on his or her own without any community support and without any objective evidence, or not. The Protestant view of community is that an individual's faith isn't based on any objective evidence and doesn't have any correlation with anybody else's beliefs or faith. Each has their own faith. Luther said, each man is a pope. Kierkegaard said, each person is alone before God. And Kierkegaard said, Christianity has no objective validity. And Dostoevsky is on this very Kierkegaardian wavelength. He knows what this view looks like. Remember, Kierkegaard says Abraham is in total isolation. He is on a lonely path. He can't explain to himself or anyone else, or he can't explain to anyone, even himself, what he's doing. And that certainly is a Kierkegaardian, Protestant, Lutheran view. And it finally leads to Kierkegaard attacking Lutheran Church for providing a herd or a community to protect people from the hard task of having faith all by themselves, in isolation, even in opposition to the intelligibility and to the ethical. But what I want to quote this time, because it sounds so much like the Christ of the Grand Inquisitor story, something from Kierkegaard's Attack on Christendom, which was his last book, his actual attack on the Lutheran Church as standing sort of between people, preventing people from being Christians. He says, the spiritual man differs from us men in being able to endure isolation. His rank as a spiritual man is proportionate to his strength for enduring isolation, whereas we men are constantly in need of the others, the herd. That's the Grand Inquisitor calls us the ant-heap. The others, the herd. We die or despair if we're not reassured by being in the herd, of the same opinion as the herd, etc. But the Christianity of the New Testament is precisely reckoned upon and related to the isolation of the spiritual man. Christianity in the New Testament consists in loving God, in hatred to man, in hatred to oneself, and thereby of other men, hating father, mother, one's own child, wife, etc. The strongest expression for the most agonizing isolation. It's really incredible. I mean, he gets this from these passages where Jesus' family comes around and he interrupts him when he's going about his preaching, and he says, and they say, your mother and brother and sisters are here, and he says, I don't have any mother, brothers, or sisters. So Kierkegaard is making that very central. So I'll go on. The strongest expression of the most agonizing isolation. And it is in view of this, I say, that such men of this quality and caliber, are not born anymore. Just like the Grand Inquisitor saying, I can go alone and live in isolation for years on berries in the wilderness, that very few people can do that. And you get the impression that nobody can do it now, except maybe Father Ferapont, who thinks he's the only one who can give up his bread and who's completely crazy. And if there aren't any sane ascetics, they don't seem to be around anymore. So the Jesus figure then says that you have to be able to live in this kind of isolation. And the Grand Inquisitor says it's impossible. Human beings can't do that. We'll provide community comfort by way of the church. So otherwise, people will become dangerous because, and we're seeing it happening right now, they get into sectarian fights in which they're killing each other because each one of them thinks that they've got the one truth that really applies to everybody. Dostoevsky's saying this on 247, near the top, about 8 lines down. For these pitiful creatures are concerned not only to find something that all would believe in and worship. What is essential is that all may be together in it. The craving for community of worship is the chief misery of every man individually and of all humanity from the beginning of time. For the sake of common worship, they've slain each other with the sword. That seems true. The Grand Inquisitor has something there. And the Grand Inquisitor says the only answer to this absolute need, this craving of all human beings, is to set up one universal church. Christendom. You just go out with your crusades and your missionaries, and you finally make the whole world Christian, and then everybody stops killing everybody else, and everybody's happy because they've all found one shared truth they can all believe in. That's what the Grand Inquisitor's done, or is on the way to doing. On 252, he says, what? That's not right. Ah, that's too bad. I don't understand that. I mistyped something. Where would this be? He talks about that we'll get them all together in a universal ante. Let's find it. Hell, anybody keep looking until you find it. Well, maybe we won't find it. It's in here anyway. And that is what the Grand Inquisitor is promising. And we don't have to read it. That's pretty straightforward. If I feel uneasy when I can't find what I want, but I also feel that I shouldn't be wasting my time trying to find it. One more look. Why is not? Well, believe it or not, I seem to have marked it, but not marked it. I'm going to look one. No, I give up. I just want to mark that I have it wrong. Okay, next issue. I can't settle that. Next issue is the morality issue. And that has lots of different sub-issues. You can see from the chart that we've been looking at. And they are confession, miracles, mystery, and authority. There's a lot to be said about each of them, or at least a lot to be said about two of them. So let's start. Confession. That's going to turn out to be a wonderful one for demagicalizing. We have to first just state the issue. So here's confession. Jesus, according to the Grand Inquisitor, demands that people must get along without moral support or moral guidance. Kierkegaard has a similar view. And therefore, by the way, that means he's against confession, where you go to the priest and he tells you whether what you've done is wrong and how wrong, and gives you a penance to make up for what you've done. All of that seems to the Grand Inquisitor to be something that Jesus is opposing. And Kierkegaard, speaking like Jesus, says that confession is a kind of immoral temptation. That's not his quote. I'll read you his quote. He says, every human being is gloriously constituted, again from the attack on Christendom, naturally. Every human being is gloriously constituted. But what ruins so many is, among other things, all this wretched tittle-tattle between man and man about that which should be suffered and matured in silence. And if you've done something wrong, then you should realize it's wrong. And when you realize it's wrong, you have to have this inner suffering where you punish yourself. This confession Kierkegaard's against this confession before men instead of before God. This hearty communication between this man and that about what ought to be secret and exist only before God in secrecy. This impatient craving for intermediary consolation. So and Jesus says we're not going to satisfy that. We're going to demand that people not get that kind of consolation. So let's hope it's on. On 248. At the top, about 4 lines down. In place of the rigid ancient law, man must hereafter with free heart decide for himself what is good and evil, having only thy image before him as his guide. But that's what the Grand Inquisitor says Jesus says, and that's what the Grand Inquisitor says people can't put up with. They have to be told, they have to be given guides as to what's good and evil. They have to confess when they've done something evil. And he's got it close. I mean, Roman Catholicism certainly puts confession, individual confession between an individual and the priest, and as an important, I think, called sacrament. And so you get the Grand Inquisitor saying on 252 how he's going to deal with it in the middle. And they will have no secrets from us. We shall allow or forbid them to live with their wives and mistresses, to have or have not, to have children, according to whether they have been obedient or disobedient, and they will submit to us gladly and cheerfully. The most painful, this is the confession part, the most painful secrets of their conscience, all they will bring to us, and we shall have an answer for all. They will be glad to believe our answer, for it will save them from the great fear and terrible agony that they endure at present in making a free decision for themselves. So that's the Grand Inquisitor's side. The Protestant side is Jesus precisely did what the Grand Inquisitor said he did. That is, he said he was replacing the Hebrew law, or fulfilling it anyway, claiming that you had to decide for yourself what was okay to do on the Sabbath and what was not, for instance. And there was no general, once you get rid of the law, then you have to, as Augustine said, love and do what you will. That is, your only guideline is going to be your own feelings. That's the Protestant view, all right, and that's the view the Grand Inquisitor attributes to Jesus. There's no public justification for moral beliefs, and you could recognize that as the suspension of the ethical. Every individual is higher than the universal. Every individual has their own right and wrong. Abraham has some kind of duty and rightness, being what from the public point of view is a murderer, and you can make life a lot easier for people if you take that away, but that's the highest Christian demand, the Dostoevsky thing Jesus says. Now remember, don't get lost. In each of these cases, we are always having an antinomy. There is the extreme Roman Catholic version. Every person gets moral guidelines, gets confessing, gets forgiven, and so forth by the church, which has a universal ethics and knows what's right and wrong, on the one hand, which seems unacceptable. And on the other hand, Kierkegaard-like total freedom, suspending the ethical, everybody doing what they are called to do, and which is unintelligible and goes against the moral standards and can't be confessed to anybody because they wouldn't understand it, and so forth. Okay, and the question, of course, again, don't get lost, is there must be some third way if it's an antinomy, and if there's one piece missing. Remember, if we're going back and forth between what the Protestant Lutheran view and the Roman Catholic view. Just so I want to make sure you're all with it. What's the third view that we're not at yet? Yes, the Russian Orthodox. Who said? Somebody back there winning some points. Anyway, right, I see who said it. Okay, so we're going to always find that there is a third possibility, the Russian Orthodox. But it's hard to see. That's what I want to tell you. And Dostoevsky has set it up brilliantly. What could be a third position, which is neither the confession and morality for everybody kind of view, and the everybody does what they please, and if they do something wrong, they have to decide it's wrong, and in isolation with God, suffer for it. Is there a third view? Yes, there is, and maybe some of you, I hope, have gotten far enough to read it already. But let's go on. We're still setting up the problems. Miracles, which I hope to get to today. No, I won't get to miracles today, probably. I certainly will on Thursday. That's why I want you to read up to 350, so we will have all the pieces. The question of miracles is whether people can keep their faith freely without miracles, or must people have miracles, suspension of physical laws, to believe in God? So the temptation to Jesus was that he would perform a miracle, throw himself down from the top of the temple and show people how he wouldn't get hurt, how the angels would catch him and cushion his fall, and that would in effect force them all to believe in him. Who could resist when you get a demonstration like that? And that's what people absolutely need. On 248, about 3/4 of the way down, the Grand Inquisitor says, is the nature of men such that they can reject miracles at the great moments of their life, the moments of their deepest and most agonizing spiritual difficulties, cling only to the free verdict of the heart? So that's a question. Can people, the best people, but normal people, not people like the Grand Inquisitor, can ordinary people live without miracles without having a religion that they are forced to believe in because it performs miracles? That's the question. The interesting thing is to see whether Dostoevsky thinks people can live without miracles. If he thinks they can't, then how is he going to show a miracle? But we're not quite ready for that. So what he says is Jesus didn't perform miracles to get people to believe in God. That's what the Grand Inquisitor says. Remember the question somebody asked last time? We have to go back to at this point. How come Jesus was performing miracles, raising a child from the dead on the steps of the church when the Grand Inquisitor found him and arrested him? And it looks like that's inconsistent. He's supposed to not perform miracles. I think the answer is supposed to be. I mean, you could just think Ivan made a mistake, but it's not likely Ivan made a mistake, because after all, Dostoevsky wrote it, and he thinks Ivan is he's created a character who's very smart. The philosophy major, he wouldn't make a mistake. So what's going on? Well, I think the point is these people are not being convinced to be Christians and have faith by this miracle. It's not sort of something that forces them to believe in Jesus as God. Because they have faith already, they're asking him to do this, and because he loves them and because they do have faith, he's performing the miracle. It's all right to perform miracles if you're not doing it in order to force people to believe in what you're doing. It's not very important, but I think that's the answer, that this is not the kind of miracle you get when you throw yourself off the top of the temple and just create a big demonstration of your absolutely power to go against the laws of physics and chemistry. This is the kind of miracle Jesus was going around doing for people who had faith, and just because he was feeling sorry for them and wanted to help them out. I think that's the right answer. Don't feel that it's important. If there was no miracle at the beginning, that would be, or of the story, that would be fine too. The main thing is, the other thing, that the Grand Inquisitor says the church will make up miracles because people do need miracles to force them to believe in it. And he says this on 250 at the top, about 5 lines down. We have corrected thy work, and have funded it. Funded it? Should be founded it, shouldn't it? Founded it upon miracle, mystery, and authority. Looking at this little typo reminds me of something. Keep your eye open for something I was looking for and can't find. There's some place in at least a different translation where it talks about, where the translator has them talking about Father Zosima's ashes, where obviously it should be his remains, because he isn't cremated and there aren't any ashes. And so if you find out, if this translation does it, where it either says Father Zosima's remains or it says Father Zosima's ashes, I want to know so I can look at the Russian. I have a feeling that anybody who just pays attention to the story can get the translation righter than saying ashes. But I can't find where it happened. So anyway, that's back to the big deal issues now. There are 2 more issues that I don't have anything to say about, and that's mystery and authority. I don't know what the antinomy is. Something like you make mysteries that are really just puzzling kind of problems, or you have mysteries which are, I don't know what, some feeling of the wonderfulness of everything. I don't know what the opposition is. So I don't know what the solution is. And if anybody does and can write a paper about it, then you get an A+ for sure, because it would be a real contribution, because the next time I gave the course, I could explain mystery and authority. A little easier to do authority. I have a feeling maybe you could do it. I mean, authority has to do with the Grand Inquisitor being a super authority, or the Pope, and on the other hand, there could be nobody who's in authority. There could be some middle kind of authority. Maybe elders like Zosima, I don't know. But anyway, what the paper topic is try to figure out what the Roman Catholic view of mystery and authority is supposed to be according to Dostoevsky, what the Protestant view of mystery or authority is supposed to be according to Dostoevsky, and then find out what Dostoevsky thinks the Russian Orthodox view is. It must be in here. I mean, the structure of the book sort of requires it. And you'll see why I say that when I show you specifically, just as he's got an answer to the food problem, he's got an answer to miracles, he's got an answer to confession, so he ought to have an answer to these other two categories. Anyway, do help me. And you will. I really, really feel bad that I can't see this one. Okay, now let's go just quickly. We finished now the antinomy. We've got the ones. We've got the material goods antinomies, the economics, the bread temptation. We've got the ethical, the confession antinomies, and we've got the miracle. I'm missing one. I guess not. No, that's right. The confession one, which is the ethics one, and the miracle one, which is what keeps people having faith. Wait a minute. There's another one. How have I done this? There's another one in here somewhere. I didn't bring my chart. But there's another one in there. There's a community one. That is whether it's got to do with everybody being, the community issue, that's all. I talked about it first. That slipped my mind. Okay, yeah, so there's the community issue, whether everybody has to believe the same thing or not. There's the ethics issue, which is the issue of confession and telling people what's right and wrong. And then there's this last kind of issue that I don't quite know what to call it, but it's got to do with miracle, mystery, authority, and wait a minute. I'm still mixing them up. Where's my chart? Anybody got a chart? Give me a chart. Thanks. Okay, let's look at it. Because I'm sort of sticking different things I see. Okay, let's stick to the chart. After all, it's probably, I must have known what I was doing when I made it. So, okay, we've got the bread issue done, asceticism, material comfort, boring moderation. We've got the community church issue done, and that's whether everybody has to believe the same thing, whether there is a universal Christendom, or whether everybody is on their own, totally. And then there's the morality one, and under that comes the confession. I don't know, morality is a funny title, because I don't know why miracles belong in there. There's some third category, I don't know what the name of it is, which has in it confessions, miracles, mystery, authority. And now we're ready to go and find and do the answer in the book. But first, I want to say something about the other issue. Remember that you gave me two problems from last time. One was how come there was a miracle at the beginning of the book, of the Ivan story. Remember what the other problem was that I couldn't figure out last time? Yes, good. You have us a little worried. Somebody saves me from panic, and you don't remember from one lecture to the next anything that we said. Okay, so I got the problem about Ivan's, the fact that in Ivan's story, the Grand Inquisitor, that Jesus kisses the Grand Inquisitor. Now, it's clear, some things are clear. Ivan certainly wrote this story. It's not just anybody's story. You either are perfect and godlike, or you're disgusting, weak, and worthless. The two sides of the self are in there. Now, why does Ivan, in effect, Ivan, now I want to make a new point, in some ways is like the Grand Inquisitor, because he, like the Grand Inquisitor, thinks that almost everybody is weak and worthless, but only a few people like Ivan can be really impeccable. And so he disdains everybody else, but he also feels the idea that he sort of feels sorry for them, the way he collects the children dossier. Of course, it isn't real sorrow, it's sadism, but I don't think he knows that. So what happens with the kiss? Well, I think Jesus kisses the Grand Inquisitor. Let's stay inside the story for a minute. Because of his purity, because of his good intentions, because of his lofty way of being. Now, who does that remind you of? I've already said it. I sort of backed into it. It's the Grand Inquisitor is in that way like Ivan. And so, in that way, and like Ivan, he's supposed to be a defender of these weak, worthless people. He doesn't accept the world as it is. He and the church are going to fix it. That's a difference. Ivan wants to kill himself in protest, while the Grand Inquisitor is going to fix up the mess left by Jesus. But at least this, the Grand Inquisitor is pure and noble and so forth. What I'm trying to say is, I think when Jesus kisses the Grand Inquisitor in Ivan's story, it's Ivan kissing himself, in the sense that he identifies with and and sort of admires the Grand Inquisitor. He wouldn't make the demands that Jesus makes on everybody. He thinks everybody else is weak and worthless, and he wouldn't be. And he's closer anyway to trying to help all these weak and worthless people out. So then the next question is, and then Alyosha plagiarizes the kiss by kissing Ivan. Well, I think just as Jesus sees the Grand Inquisitor's good intentions, and so Alyosha sees Ivan's good intentions, and he hopes that somehow Ivan will work out the aspect of Ivan that's wrong. And this aspect of Ivan that wants to be lofty and good and pure will get together with the earthly. The heavenly and the earthly will get together somehow, and he's kissing him because he's trying. He's got the wrong method right now, getting rid of the half, but he's trying. It's very different than the way Zosima bows to the ground before Dmitri, because Dmitri understands that people are both lofty and base, both good and bad, and he's trying to get it together and suffering from trying to get it together. That's more of a tribute to Ivan than Alyosha's. That's more of a tribute to Dmitri, I'm trying to say, from Zosima, than Alyosha's kiss could possibly mean when he kisses Ivan goodbye. But he's hoping that Ivan will come through. Let's see what else here. Yeah, that's all I have to say about that. It's not a very interesting or important question, probably, or at least I don't consider that a very interesting and important answer. Yeah. Okay, let's see. You hear her? Probably not. So is there some connection between the fact that the Grand Inquisitor says to Jesus, go out and never come back, and Ivan says to Alyosha, I'm going to tell you the story of my life, then I never want to see you again? I don't know. It's an interesting question. I leave it for a little longer. I doubt it, because what it means when the Grand Inquisitor says to Jesus, "Go out and never come back," it's you're just making people miserable. We fixed it up now. Just leave us alone. That's the best deed you can do. When Ivan says to Alyosha, "Go and I never want to see you again," it's just Ivan worrying about personal involvements. I think it's just an accident. But if you don't, come and talk to me about it. I have faith in your intuition. Yeah.
What was the significance of the references in the Grand Inquisitor of UC Berkeley? And what was the reference to the diet?
No, the earthly is a very Dostoevskian category. And let's give me a page. But let me say something first. Now, I think it's the factor of the self, which is the one that is sensual and it involved in the world. And it's going to turn out, remember, Zosima already hints at this, that you have to get together the heavenly and the earthly. And I take those to be the positive names for the two factors. Remember, how you define the set of factors in Kierkegaard and Dostoevsky determines whether you can get them together. If you think that they are insect and angel, you can't get them together. But if you think that they are the sort of embodied sensual aspect and the spiritual aspect, that's the earthly, heavenly, I think. But let's look at your quote. Okay, well, it may be related. Well, let's think about it. She's saying it's like Nietzsche's distinction between the Apollonian and the Dionysian in The Birth of Tragedy. And since practically no one has read The Birth of Tragedy here, unless you're in Sluga's course right now, is that what's happening? How many are in Sluga's course and Nietzsche? I think we better talk about this later. Okay, anybody else? Okay, let's go on then, because I think that the solutions are much more interesting than anything we've talked about so far. But I want to catch up where we are. Now what I'm doing is trying to skip the part that I jumped ahead about bread, which I'm just about to skip. And here's where we were last time. I'm now connecting up. I remember I said, but hippie communes fail. And people can't really just hold everything in common. Even if the kibbutzes are still there, people are allowed their private property. And that's because people are fundamentally selfish and trying to acquire possessions and protect themselves and their possessions. I read you the quotes from 293 and 294. Never mind who says them. We'll hear more from the mysterious visitor. Now what's going on? Oh, yeah, here we are. Nothing's going on. I read you the part about how man keeps apart at the very bottom, each in his own groove, holds aloof, hides himself, hides what he has, ends by repelling others and repelling himself, heaps up riches and so forth, and sinks into self-destructive impotence. I said that was all like a philosopher named Hobbes, who thinks that everybody feels vulnerable to everybody else and sort of builds themselves, tried to build themselves an unattackable place where they live and fight everybody else off. But everybody's afraid of everybody else, and it's a very hostile way to live. It's got to do with how people get more and more riches and paintings and carpets and diamonds, and then they have to build more and more gated communities in which they are keeping off all the poorer people, and the distinction between the richer and the poorer get greater and greater, and everybody is in trouble. That's the picture that, now comes the interesting part. It's the picture that Dostoevsky himself agrees with. He thinks that it is human nature. Human nature is, as Hobbes said, nasty. Human life is, as Hobbes said, nasty, brutish, and short. And Dostoevsky completely agrees with that. So no wonder communes don't work. Given human nature, they couldn't possibly work. it's utopian to think that all these people could share their property and love each other. That if for human beings to be able to do that, what would have to happen? They would have to be totally transformed. Their human nature would have to be gotten rid of, and they'd have to be given a new nature. Does that sound familiar? That's Christian. And that's Russian Orthodox, Dostoevsky Christian. That is, people have to be reborn and become a new being. The original sinful human beings are sinful human beings. And if you want to build you can't build a utopian community on these sinful, selfish people like us. Only those Christian people who have been reborn and filled with love and giving instead of neediness and possessing things could possibly build such a community. So that's what the mysterious visitor says in 293. We have to hear a lot more about it. But what we're talking about now is the demagicalizing of being reborn, of being saved, where human nature for existentialists is changeable. You can start with roughly the same nature for everybody, but your culture will change your nature, will give you a nature. And then if you happen to be in a Christian culture, it'll give you a way to transform your nature radically. And so here in the middle of 293, right, where he's talking about how selfish every people normally are. He says, he's talking about what he calls, about 4 lines down in the paragraph before the one I read, it's a spiritual, psychological process. To transform the world, to recreate it, men must turn into another path psychologically. Now, psychologically is a funny word there. Dostoevsky hates psychologists because he thinks that they take for granted this selfish human nature. They don't have any clue about transforming this and transforming love. And that becomes clear in the trial, which we'll read later. He makes fun of the psychologist. The problem is he hasn't any word for what he's doing. What he calls they have to turn into another path psychologically is what I'm calling. He has to turn into another path existentially. That is, it's not, psychology is just a study of how people are. You've got to have an existential view of people as not having a fixed nature, but being able to be reborn with a new nature before you can understand what's going on. And it's just too bad he has no word for it. So let's say they have to turn into another path existentially. Until you have become really, in actual fact, a brother to everyone, brotherhood will not come to pass. No sort of scientific teaching, no kind of common interest will ever teach men to share property and privileges with equal consideration for all. I mean, that's Dostoevsky's view. Zosima is telling it, and Zosima heard it from this guy called the Mysterious Visitor, we'll get to in a minute. And Zosima believes it, and Zosima generally speaks for Dostoevsky, who believes it. Only if people are transformed can they really live in this kind of commune that he has in mind. And we'll come back to that a lot later. But there's so many things in the air that you have to drop that one for the moment. Let's see now. Where am I? So he's anticipating here the failure of state communism in Russia, and the failure, he would say, of the free market. As long as people are sinful and selfish and insecure, none of these systems will work. And what do you have to do then? Well, you have to have some way of transforming everybody. That's a big job, and that's an issue that comes up next in the book, or comes up early in the book. It's a story about transformation in a very obscure way, which I've only come to understand in the last few years with lots of help from papers and so forth. there's this obscure issue, which I imagine none of you understood. I certainly couldn't understand. When they're fighting over the question of whether the church should become the state or the state should become the church. That's the issue we're talking about. Maybe some of you can glimmer what it means. Do you think anybody can any of you understand how that's related to this issue? What would it be for the church to become the state to become the church? It's hard to tell. I don't think anybody can figure it out because it's not obvious. But Dostoevsky's got something up his sleeve, and Ivan has written a paper about it. And he's a brilliant Ivan, ironic as he is and so forth. He's got all the monks all upset and confused about it. On page 74, let's just begin in the middle here. You are completely at the top, but the middle of the argument. The monks are all arguing with each other. We can come in there. So he says, you are completely misunderstanding it, said Father Pius. You must understand that the church is not to be transformed into the state. That's Rome and its dream. See, that's the Grand Inquisitor, the church getting transformed into the state. The church takes over the job of distributing the goods. It becomes the communism and the planned economy and takes in all the bread and gives it out from each according to his ability, to each according to his need. That's completely secularized. The Grand Inquisitor knows it is, wants it to be. He said, we're done with this religious stuff. And that's what the Grand Inquisitor's been saying. So he says, that's Rome and its dream. That is the third temptation of the devil. On the contrary, the state is to be transformed into the church, will ascend and become a church over the whole world, which is the complete opposite of ultramontanism, whatever that is, and Rome, we know what that is. And your interpretation. It is only a glorious destiny ordained for the Orthodox Church. You see, I've told you about this. The star will arise in the east. The Orthodox Church is going to save the world because the state is going to become the church. Now, what does that mean? Well, it means that somehow everybody in the state will get transformed and become Christian. And then they won't be selfish and isolated. It's a funny slogan because Ivan is doing weird things, but to say that the state becomes a church is to say you get Christian socialism. You get a kind of socialism which is based on the fact that people have all been transformed already and aren't selfish anymore. I'll give you quotes that show you that that's what's happening. On 73. See, the trouble with the Grand Inquisitor is the people are not transformed. They're taken over in their selfishness, and they're given a state that is, the church turns into a state, and it's all secular, and it won't work, and it's going to collapse and so forth. But he's got this other view now where everybody's going to get transformed before they get together. Okay, it's the top of 73. So just skipping first at the top, about 5 lines down. As for Rome, it's proclaimed a state instead of a church 1,000 years ago. So there it's clear. In Rome, the church has become a state. Now, what is the opposite? Well, this is what I call, one could call, when people do call, Christian socialism. At the middle of 73, the middle of that big paragraph, Christian society is at present not ready and is only resting on some 7 righteous men. That is, they are never lacking. It will continue unslack and in expectation and so forth. That's not what I'm expected to read, not that it's long. Well, let's see if it gets any more. Even though it is long delayed until the end of the ages, it is ordained to come to pass, and so forth. And yeah, no, I don't understand second time what I'm doing there, so I have to fix it. Every year there's always something more to fix. I got a better quote, don't worry. To make this view plausible, this the state becoming a church, and there being Christian socialism, Dostoevsky does a very clever move. Remember, when he wants to make an argument, convincing, he shows that it convinces the person he's arguing with. That's one technique. That's when Alyosha admits to Ivan he wouldn't create the world either, given the mess that it's in. But now, the even stronger thing that Dostoevsky does is sometimes he puts the view that he thinks is the right view in the mouth of the enemy of that view. Though the enemy of the view doesn't really know that he's doing this. You'll see it a lot later when there's a devil running around, and maybe, yes, even Thursday. But here, the person he puts it into whose mouth he puts the right thing, is the sort of the westernized guy, Muizov, whom you don't hear very often, sort of Enlightenment type, who spends a lot of his time in Europe, who's the enemy of all this Christian stuff. He has him say on 74, very clever. Now we're looking, and I'm looking for the evidence for why I think what I think about this church-state business, and here it is, about 15 lines from the bottom of 76. Where? Well, wait a minute. That is not what I want. Don't worry, I'll find it. 74. Yeah, 74. Okay. It's the bottom. Muizov is talking about what the sort of CIA people he hobnobs with are saying. These are the spies who are going around in Europe trying to capture the nihilists and anarchists and people who are going to undermine the state. And Muizov talks to them, and what they tell Muizov is the following at the bottom of 74. We're not particularly afraid, said he, that's the CIA guy, of all these socialists, anarchists, infidels, and revolutionaries. We keep watch on them and know all their doings. But there are a few peculiar men among them who believe in God and are Christians, and at the same time are socialists. These are the people we are most afraid of. So those are the people who, in some way, which we don't really understand till the end of the book, are going to turn the whole world into the right kind of Christianity. And out of that, then they can make the right kind of government and the right kind of institutions. That Dostoevsky sort of pulls this off at about the last 10 pages of the book in a dazzling and amazing bunch of arguments. But he's trying to show how, what was it? The star will arise in the east. That is, that Russia will become the center for the Christianizing of everybody in this non-Christendom way, not coercing everybody, but the source of this kind of spreading of the kind of love which transforms people. Until everybody gets transformed, then you have and then the church, the state will have become a church. So, and that's his answer to how the economic problems of the world are going to be solved. They won't be solved as long as people are sinful, selfish. Okay, that's not exciting yet. The only two really exciting ones are coming up, don't worry, but is Confession and Miracles. So we need one more before we get Confession and Miracles. This is a very quick and not very exciting one. Remember the issue about the community and the individual, which either everybody is in one universal antheap, which I couldn't find in here, is in here, or they are each one as isolated as Abraham, directly talking to God and making no sense to anybody else, and so forth. And which is it? When people are people so desperate for community that they need one universal Christendom, or are people able to live alone in isolation, in direct relation to God, or is there some third possibility? I'm sure there's a third possibility, but it just passes very fast. Remember, it's all supposed to be, or not all, but a lot of it in the Grand Inquisitor, in Father Zosima's, what isn't called Confessions, what's it called? Something. Zosima's Conversations and Exhortations of Father Zosima. And in there, he tells what he thinks the right middle thing is between total Christendom and isolated individuals on 311. And it's simply the following. I mean, it's not very exciting. That you need more than one person to be a church, to be a community, to live for human beings, and less than everybody. And what he says is at the bottom of 311, and if two of you are gathered together, then there is a whole world, a world of living love. Embrace each other tenderly and praise God, for it is only in you two, if only in you two, his truth has been fulfilled. That means that as long as there's a community, a small community of people who love each other, and it's open to more people, it's not a kind of closed community, but it doesn't have to have in it everybody, then you've got something between the universal church and isolated individuals. And that's what Zosima is. He's always for these sort of local loving communities. And that's the early Christian community. So you've always remembered, too, that you've got in the background that he thinks that the Russian Orthodox Church captures the truth of the early Christian community that they lost because they got too much philosophy mixed up in them. Then they went off, became Roman Catholics, and that was bad. Then they rebelled against the Roman Catholics in the opposite direction, and that was bad. But the Russian Orthodox Church has captured the insights of the early Christian community. So you keep getting these community of loving people as the solution. Okay, good. Now we have time for something exciting, namely how he solves the confession problem. How many of you had a chance to read The Mysterious Visitor already? Hope. Nobody? One or two? Did I not tell you to read far enough? I don't remember what I told you to read, so I may have done something wrong. How far did I tell you to read? 293. And is that before or after The Mysterious? It's right smack in the middle. Did I say 293? I did. That wasn't very smart of me. In fact, that was very, very dumb. Because 293 is right in the middle of The Mysterious Visitor, or near the beginning, which begins on 291. And now I don't know what to think. Let me think a minute. I will switch to Confessions if Confessions is earlier, but I'm pretty sure it's later. Go ahead, ask something else, because I don't want to get too far in what you haven't read. Yeah.
No, it's necessary to object them. I don't and there was not
She's saying, well, let me put this in a bigger context. What she's doing is really objecting to this idea that the Russian Orthodox Church has got this idea of small Christian communities. Or if it has it, it's only because it's got the monks, and then the monks don't seem to be the right kind of Christian community. They're not open to everybody, and they've got the wrong kind of authority, the authority of the elders. You may be on to something about what's because now you're looking very puzzled, because it isn't always the Russian Orthodox Church as it stands, which is existentialized Christianity. We better get that clear. I mean, it's much closer than Roman Catholicism or Luther Protestantism. The Russian Orthodox Church has preserved more of the existential, demagicalized truth of the early Christian community. But every once in a while, he just thinks that the Russian Orthodox Church is wrong, and then there's some kind of clue. One clue is when he sends Alyosha out of the monastery, never to come back. I mean, Zosima has done something wrong, and but the next clue is that the Russian Orthodox have the wrong view of confession, it turns out. So the Protestants certainly have the wrong view, the Catholics have the wrong view, we said. I mean, people just telling other people their sins and getting told what they have to do and getting forgiven or not forgiven. And certainly Kierkegaard has a wacky view, going along in this absolute isolation, suspending the ethical. But the monks have but the the actual Russian Orthodox Church is just like the Catholic Church on confession, I've been told. Are there any Russian Orthodox people here? They should definitely tell me if I'm wrong. I've been told that they have the same notion of confession to one individual priest that the Roman Catholics do. And in that case, Dostoevsky just thinks they're wrong. And when he existentializes confession, which is what I'm going to talk about, even though you haven't read it, I'm afraid, he changes it. So I'm going to go on talking about this. I can't just throw away the time just because I was stupid and gave you the wrong assignment. That's because every time I teach this, there's a different book, and the pages keep getting changed, and I sometimes lose it trying to keep track. So I'm going to talk about confession. And there are really three levels of the answer. I was just telling you that. There's the real Russian Orthodox view of confession, which isn't what Dostoevsky wants. And because you'll see he thinks that wouldn't have any existential significance. And then there's what ought to be the Russian Orthodox view, which is this existential truth that they should have preserved from primitive early Christianity. And it's illustrated by Zosima's view of confession. And that turns up on 312. I'll try to tell you things that... oh, does it? Well, let's hope so. Just a second. Well... Well, there's another mystery. Where is it? I don't know. But I've got other ones. I've got backup quotes. So let's see. This seems to be wrong. 312. I'm looking for what Zosima does when he does confession. Well, that's not it. So let's look at 158. Okay, good. Here's what I was looking for. This is how Zosima does it. Notice it's not the way the Roman Catholics do it or the Lutherans do it, or even the way the Russian Orthodox do it. It's what Dostoevsky thinks is the right way to do it because it captures the existential meaning of confession, which we haven't seen yet, which we are going to see pretty soon. Anyway, as a rule, every evening after services, the monks flocked into Father Zosima's cell. I'm at the bottom of 158. And confessed about their sins of the day, their sinful thoughts, temptations, their disagreements, if there had been any. Some confessed kneeling, their elder absolved, reconciled, exhorted, imposed penance, blessed, and dismissed them. It was against this general confession that the opponents of elders protested, maintaining that it profaned the sacrament of confession. See, that's the clue, that the way the confession was done in the Russian Orthodox Church was not the way Zosima did it. And people were protesting. And what was Zosima doing different was he was getting everybody into a kind of group confession. In the old days when I was teaching this here in Berkeley in, I guess, the 70s, there were all these encounter groups. I don't think the encounter groups exist anymore, do they? Probably the word doesn't even mean anything to you anymore. There were groups of students who got together to confess to each other in groups of what they were really, and how they felt about each other and how they felt about whatever in life, and sort of tried to understand and forgive each other. I guess the nearest thing we've got to that now is what happened in South Africa, where they had reconciliation groups, where people confessed that they had killed and tortured other people, and that they regretted it, and people listened to them and forgave them. And it was all public confession. Dostoevsky believes you've got to have public confession for it to capture the existential meaning of confession. And that's what now he's going to try to convince you of that. On 336, there's something. I'm surprised it's back there. Really? We will see. Not in the least. It isn't back there. Shouldn't be back there. Oh, how about 291? Nothing is on 291 of any interest. Ah. Okay. Anyway, all that quote was supposed to say is that Dostoevsky's going to give you a psychological, existential story about the true meaning of confession, why it has to be, why people have to confess, to whom they should confess, what happens to them when they don't confess, what happens to them when they do confess. All of this is told by the mysterious visitor to Zosima, and all of this is in this section beginning on 291, where Zosima is reporting on it. So I'm going to start talking about it. It's not a big deal plot thing. I wouldn't give away things like that, and it's important to read it. It's the story of a guy who is this visitor to Zosima, who committed a murder. I don't know how many years before. I have a feeling about 20. Maybe it says in here. And got away with it because they arrested the wrong guy. The guy really killed his girlfriend or mistress, or that he killed the woman he loved, and out of jealousy. And he got away with it because they arrested the wrong person, and before they could have a trial, where presumably the truth might well have come out, this guy died in jail, the wrong one they arrested. But since they arrested him for some reason or other, they thought he was the murderer, so they never suspected Mikhail, this guy, the one who comes to visit Zosima, who is the real murderer. Now, then we have the whole story about what it's like to be a murderer, according to Dostoevsky, or to have committed a terrible crime. And it's interesting. Any of you seen Woody Allen's Crimes and Misdemeanors? No, that's too bad. Well, good. And it's Woody Allen sort of taking back the Dostoevsky. He knows his Dostoevsky, and there's sort of parallels between what happens in there and what happens in the story of the mysterious visitor. You want to say something? Yeah. That's the church becoming a state. Yes, I think that's right. People, but if you find me the passage, when you don't have to find it right now. If you can, that's fine, because I have to see it in order to see how it relates to this, or maybe you'll see how it relates to this when we go further, because I think it should be the same here as when the church becomes when the state becomes a church, because it's the right understanding. We're getting the right understanding of confession here, and we will certainly have the right understanding of confession if the state became a church. So wait and see. Okay, now, so the guy gets away with this murder. In the Crimes and Misdemeanors, the guy gets away. He also murders his mistress, but he has the mafia do it instead of doing it himself. And he gets away with it because because he has the right mafia connections. Then what happens in here is that he is haunted by the memory of the murder. And he tries to deal with his guilt by suffering alone before God. And in the Woody Allen movie, he's obsessed with this murder. He gets more and more upset about it. Any of you seen it? And he is more and more tempted to confess. You've all read The Brothers Karamazov. Remember how Raskolnikov is always sort of haunted by the murder. And did I say The Brothers Karamazov? You've all read Crime and Punishment, and you remember how Raskolnikov feels that he has to confess, only he doesn't get there alone, only pushed by Sonia. But here, we have another case of somebody who commits a murder and feels more and more guilty and more haunted by it, more and more tempted to confess. And then the Woody Allen movie goes off in an entirely anti-Dostoevsky direction, and this guy simply gets over it after a while, doesn't feel guilty anymore, doesn't bother him anymore. He goes back to being a good husband and father and a donor. The movie begins with some big party for him because he's a big philanthropist and everybody likes him. And that's that. And this is just a destruction of this story. But here in this story, he's haunted by the murder, and he tries to deal with it just the way the Grand Inquisitor said you should try to deal with it. The Grand Inquisitor said that Jesus said you should try to deal with it, namely alone, and Kierkegaard said, alone before God. So on 297 now, where I'm afraid you aren't. You know, you could have read beyond what I said. I don't want to feel too guilty. You just go on reading anyway. But I wish I had told you. So he thinks, in the middle of the page, at last he began to be bitterly and ominously haunted by the blood of his murdered victim, by the young life he had destroyed, by the blood that cried out for vengeance. He began to have awful dreams. That being a man of strength, he bore his suffering a long time, thinking, I shall atone for everything by this secret agony. It's exactly what the Jesus figure and Kierkegaard say you should do if you've done something terribly wrong. But he understands, but you have to confess in public. And that's where it gets interesting. Skipping down about 10 lines. He confessed to me, that's not, never mind confess there. We can just say he told me, Zosima is saying. He told me that he had thoughts of killing himself, but he began to be haunted by another idea, an idea which he had at first regarded as impossible and unthinkable, though at last it got such a hold on his heart that he could not shake it off. He dreamed of rising up, going out and confessing before all men that he had committed murder. For 3 years, this dream pursued him, haunted him in different forms. At last, he believed with his whole heart that if he confessed his crime, he would heal his soul and would be at peace forever. But this belief filled his heart with terror, for how could he carry it out? And then he sees Zosima at a duel, and in the duel, Zosima throws away his gun, and this inspires him to go see Zosima, and that inspires him to carry out this confession. We got to go slow here. What is exactly bothering him that makes him have to do a confession? Well, that's the most interesting thing. What's really making him miserable is that people don't know who he really is, because he really is a murderer, and they think he's a nice, upstanding father, a member of the community, and so forth. But this is on the middle of 297. He says, children came, how dare I love them, teach them, educate them? How can I talk to them of virtue? I have shed blood. They were fine children. He longed to caress them, but I can't look at their innocent faces. I am unworthy. And so, but his wife and children don't know who he really is. And if they knew he was really a murderer, they certainly wouldn't want to be living with him and caressed by him and loved by him. And he knows that. So everything he's doing is a kind of pretense and a kind of affront to them. And he is in total isolation. It's very much like the woman in Hiroshima Mon Amour, who can't, it isn't even, she didn't do anything bad. Her lover was just killed. But what's similar is just that she is in total isolation. She has this desire for intimacy, but she can't tell anybody what's really important to her and who she really is. She's never told her husband. She's never told anybody. She had to get drunk and slapped around to tell the Japanese man. And he's in the same situation. He can't relate to anybody as whom he really is, so he's in total isolation. Go ahead. She's ahead of the story. She's done the reading. That's cheating. Okay. So yes, but wait till we get there. She's asking the question so he's going to go confess in a minute. You'll see. And to all of his associates. And what happens next is, to his sort of consternation, they don't believe him. They think he's a nice man and a pillar of the community, and he's going to church presumably and everything. He couldn't be a murderer. Now, I'm not going to say yet why that Dostoevsky got taken care of that, taking care of your objection. But we have to get there. We will. Let's see. So he feels he can't love anybody. Nobody can love him because they don't even know who he is, and he is in a terrible state. Now he is, we have to sort of keep track of lots of things, in existentialized hell. Because it turns out existentialized hell is isolation. And so first we hear it from him, and then we'll hear it from Zosima. He says on 298, about 2/3 down, I know it will be heaven for me, heaven the moment I confess. 14 years I've been in hell. I want to suffer. I want to take my punishment and begin to live. You can pass through the world doing wrong, but there's no turning back. Now I dare not love my neighbor and even my own children, so forth. And if you look back at Zosima when you read this, you see that he has drawn a similar conclusion about hell. He says on 297, let's hope. Oh, no, it couldn't be Zosima, could it? No, that's not right. Where is Zosima on this? 312. I hope. You never know what's going to show up. Okay, he says, what is hell? Of hell and hellfire at the bottom of 312. Fathers and teachers, I ask, what is hell? I maintain that it is the suffering of being unable to love. Remember, he can't love anybody because they don't know who he is. Once in an infinite existence, in measurable time and space, a spiritual creature was given on this earth the power of saying, I am and I love. And then, but if you can't do that, I mean, there's nothing more to say here, but if you can't do that, then you suffer. And that suffering is being in hell. It's also, you'll see in a minute, being in the hands of the living God. This is all being existentialized. Let's see now. 297. Keep track of too many issues here, but I will do it. So when he sees Zosima in the duel, he decides to confess. He says at the bottom of 297, looking at you, I made up my mind. And that is an aside. People, I got to say this too, and the things I have to say before you get, but the more I can say that it doesn't tell you more about what you're reading, the better. Well, it's interesting that it was seeing Zosima at the duel that made him make up his mind to confess, because one of the morals of the book, which you have to keep your eyes open for, is that people are responsible for lots of things they're not aware of, good and bad. Here Zosima is doing a very important good deed, and he doesn't even know he's doing it. There are people in the book who are doing very important bad deeds. We'll hear about one next time. And they don't know they're doing it. So although Zosima is wrong, that he's responsible for all the suffering in the world, there is the truth in it is you are responsible for a lot more suffering and a lot more good in the world than you realize. And it's being shown here, and it gets shown every once in a while. Okay, so people, and he says suffering is hell. I just read that. Or did I not? Is there another one? No, that's fine. And I just want to say, being in hell is not a metaphor, of which, you could say, boy, it was hell, when meaning, the exam was very hard or something. Being in hell, this is being in hell, existentialized. That is, there's no other hell from Dostoevsky's point of view. When you understand what hell is, you understand that it's this being in a position where people can't love you and you can't love them. And that's what we've already seen. And now, I think it's perfect timing, but I'll just go on a tiny bit, make sure where we are. Typically, we are, okay, 299, we might as well see that too. Another thing that gets demagicalized at the bottom of 299, he says, it is a fearful thing to fall into the hands of a living God, he reads in the Bible. He read it and flung down the book. He was trembling all over. An awful text, he said. There's no denying it, and so forth. That is, that's what it is to fall into the hands of the living God. It's to have the kind of isolation and suffering that he's having, or had, still having. He hadn't confessed when he read the passage yet. And so, and now one last thing, so you can see how this all fits together. That if his problem is isolation, then confessing to one other person, a priest, who's sworn to keep your secret, that's what priests are when they take confessions, isn't going to help a bit. You've got to confess to your friends, your family, and the public if you're going to get a confession that works. So now we've got an existentialized story of why people who do something wrong need to confess and why they need to confess to the whole community. Then we're going to have her question. It's a cliffhanger till next time, but nobody in the community believes him. So what good does it do? We'll find out. Okay, now you read it. And read this to her. I won't feel guilty next time.